Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I am joined by my game master and fellow hosts, Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I think so, but I'm not sure that I'm really hearing you. It might be a hallucination.
That's how I sort of feel about. Yeah, I hope most of my interactions in the world is me just hallucinating. We are here to talk about episode 2 of season 3 of Black Mirror, the first of the Netflix seasons. Playtest, which is another of those. I don't say body horror, but where we've had the seed or the grain, and then we had the sort of the disc seed in the Christmas one, and now we've got the mushroom in this one, which is another thing injects into you. But this is. An American traveler short on cash signs up to test a revolutionary new gaming system, but soon can't tell where the hot game ends and reality begins. This has got. I like to play these games if I know that face, but this has got Wyatt Russell, who is Kurt Russell's son in it, who went on to be in the MCU, as did Hannah John Carmen, who plays Sonya. She was in the Ant-Man film, so some MCU connections, but. Beyond that, again, they're sort of the main headers of people you'll probably recognise. But yeah, this is another one. This is about an hour long, but an interesting technology. This is going into gaming now. So, Julian, what were your first thoughts, or what were your initial thoughts then on Playtest?
I think this is a fine episode, but I think that it at the end is like one of those Twilight Zone episodes where it's like it's a fantasy, so we can do anything. The twist at the end does not work. There are things that I object to, but it is fundamentally an enjoyable little ride. And that's one that we've said about the last episode. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I like this much, much more than the first episode. I do think it's let down massively by the final twist and the reveal as to like what causes all the problems. To the extent of, again, I get a little irritated. But I like the last part of this episode. What I would say is, again, I feel there's pacing issues, I think, in this episode. Again, it feels a bit like we've gone, right, you've got an hour to fill. And so they've gone, right, so we're going to fill the first 20 minutes with this linear story of some guy traveling around Europe and stuff. And you go, okay. Or not even Europe, around the world. And the whole him getting to the position of learning about this gaming organization and getting, becoming a part of it takes so long that I was getting to the point where I was like, I know what this episode's about, having seen the sort of the little blurb and that. I was expecting at one point to have like a reveal halfway through that it was already in the game and this was like some tour game or something. Because this is so linear, weirdly linear, that the storytelling in this was like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And I was just like, all right, this is really linear. That I found bizarre.
In what way? In what way do you think it's really linear? It's just it follows the main character. So
there's no invented. Yeah, literally that. Like it starts with him leaving home, has him travel the world, has this sort of like little snafu where he's short of money, so he ends up doing this one job to join this gaming thing, and then it goes wrong. But I'm like, right, all that information again. This comes up to something we were talking about before we started recording. This idea of like. The crux of this is almost like a human, you want to get to know the character, this Wyatt Russell. Like the whole point is about his psychological condition, but you don't learn about that until quite a way in. and they keep trying to give you information as if it's some great reveal. I'm like, this doesn't need to be like, this should almost be done, not in like a Pulp Fiction kind of way, but like have him start with the game and then drop information, like have him forced to confront things in the game or some other way that like information's rolled out, because like you get told things at least twice in some cases, and then other things you get told later on. I'm like, well, surely they'd have had that conversation before. It was just the storytelling in this was very, very straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of works for me. I mean, I think that there maybe is a little too much at the beginning, but you need him to turn to the game to make money, right? And then that whole situation comes back in a sort of Wizard of Oz way, right? Within the game as one of his horrific moments of sort of what's really going on here. Yeah, my objection is less that. I mean, I think that works for me. Obviously, the best stuff is in the house, right? You know, the main crux of the episode, most of the runtime, it seems, at least half of it. No,
it's 50-50. It is literally 50-50.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like basically from the whack-a-mole thing, which looks amazing, right? I mean, you want some American dollars, here's what the whack-a-mole looks fantastic. Like that, we're suddenly in a sci-fi world, and I think that sequence is great. The stuff in the mansion, you know, sort of my problem is less with the linear storytelling and more with the logic of, you know, I mean, ultimately all of this is the game misfiring, so everything is justified. Okay. So why does it start with him able to run his hands through things and they kind of have that great digitizing effect where like the polygons kind of stick to his hand? And I think that looks amazing. But then suddenly, you know, he's feeling things and attacked by, you know, the girl, and you're like, okay, well, you know, if in retrospect this is supposed to be the game misfiring, how did it progress like that? Why wouldn't, I mean, you're supposed to think simultaneously that it is sort of learning and the AI is kind of getting out of control. And also in retrospect that really it was out of control from the beginning. So there is a kind of progression, but ultimately that doesn't make sense.
Well, no,
given the reveal at the end.
Oh yeah, I agree with the reveal at the end. The problem is, like I say, everything we're supposed to understand that everything that goes on from the, you know, is revealed, right? Let's go to the reveal. The reveal is that the moment, like, so there's almost like, this is like, let's go Inception with this shit, right? Because there's different layers in the reveal, which kind of goes like, at what point do you just stop? So, like, but we find it. So basically, when he goes into the game, he's in a plain white room, and like you said, there's a table. He gets a headset, and he gets the mushroom put into the back of his neck, and then he's presented with like the whack-a-mole. Okay, that's level 1. Yep. So then he is taken to meet the game master, the CEO of this company. Get the guy's name. And that's where they go into that sort of rather ornate office, and they've got all that sort of thing. So I've got this other one that basically drills into your head and gets into what scares you the most. Okay, that's level 2. That's layer 2 of reality. All right, let's call it that for now. Just sit with me. Then you get the actual house, this haunted house that he goes to. That is like the testing ground. Yeah, where it all happens. He sees the spider. He sees the creepy guy that reminds him of his bully. He then Sonia comes back and all this other stuff, right? So then when he's pulled back, he's like, okay, well, let's pull him out. Oh, he's in the office. Oh, he's not in the office. Let's pull him out again. He's actually it went from all the way back to that very first moment with the whack-a-mole. And I'm going, okay, so even the whack-a-mole wasn't real then.
Right.
So, all right. So, what is in his? So what triggered these things? At what point did his mind kick in? So, this is like one of those things where I think of films like Identity or There's a couple of others where you go, it was all in their mind. It was all just their psychosis playing out and everything that they faced onto. So you should be able to track back and go, oh, that represents that. So what they've talked to that first half of this show should be them laying out his psychosis, right? You find out about the fact he's avoiding his mum. You find out that his dad had Alzheimer's, and so sort of like he had to deal with that. So he feels bad about turning his back on his family to go do this traveling. He mentions this bully that was there as a kid. Cool. I should then be able to track through from the moment, if I was to watch this backwards, right? If this was a Hitchcock film or a Nolan film, I should be able to watch this backwards and go, that whack-a-mole, well, actually, it wasn't the company that created whack-a-mole. That whack-a-mole links back to this conversation he had with this other person at this point. This haunted house or the office that he goes to, he saw here, like it was in a photo or it was in a magazine that he saw when he was presented with this guy. The haunted house, he even calls out the haunted house and says, oh, this is the one that we saw in that game. And they go, oh, yeah, it was made in reality. Cool. That's the first time they call it out. Everything, if you're really clever with this and you want to go Nolan level with this shit, you should be able to track back. So this should split in half, and everything in that second half should be able to link with something in that first half. But it doesn't. And that's why when you get the reveal at the end, I feel a bit like, oh, you've just gone, it was a dream. It was a second dream. And you're just like, oh, okay. All right. You've again, like this isn't creative, inventive, intelligent storytelling. It's just, we're going to tell you little bits and pieces, and then some of that's going to play out. And, I
mean, let's be clear. It's entertaining storytelling.
I'm not saying it isn't
clever.
It's not clever, but it thinks it is. And that's the point. That's what I get annoyed with when they say that it thinks it's clever.
No, I agree. And that is one of the biggest problems with Black Mirror, is that it is way less clever than it thinks it is.
Yes.
And it's the pretension of Black Mirror that really turns some people off, right? The people who don't like Black Mirror are like, it's so damn pretentious. And I'm like, really? But then I sort of think about it and I'm like, no, yeah, all the stuff that bothers me is just this kind of thing where, it thinks that is a great ending. It's a terrible ending. Yeah. The ending is the worst part of this episode. No, you're entirely correct in what you're saying. I would say that even if it doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence with sort of Wizard of Oz style, something you saw in a magazine, I mean, I would like that. That would be the best ending, where it's sort of Kaiser Soze, like, here's the magazine. And then it would be like, oh, okay, this makes sense as an ending, right? And feels creepy. Instead, it's like, golly gee, what if it was one level up, So imagining, if you take that ending seriously, which we kind of have to do, why would he imagine this whack-a-mole thing? He has no idea what this device does. Why would he go step by step? Why would he imagine this office? And, there's so much that he would not have imagined. And why would you then progress to inside the game? At first it's, polygons and goes through you, and then, sort of escalating its fear. Well, he has no reason to think this is a game of fear at all. Nope. I mean, that only makes sense if that actually is some level of reality. So then you can't get the final reveal. I mean, you just can't. So yeah, that's
have him as like a horror fan. Have him as a horror fan, or even an anti-horror. I hate horror films. I can't do horror films. So his fear is being trapped in a horror game, but he's got to do it for the money. Like, have him have to face up to that. And yeah, because the other problem I have with this is, again, this idea of it being clever, but not being clever enough, or think it's clever, is it calls out at least one like horror movie trope. Like, he opens the cupboards, he's seeing the character, this creepy character that looks like the bully that from when he was a kid, but grown up. And he's opening these cupboards looking for some snacks and stuff. And then he says, oh, he's going to be here, isn't he? He's going to be behind this cupboard when I close it. And I'm like, oh, okay, he is. And it closes in the shadows on the wall. And I'm like, okay, cool. So you're going to start calling out recognizable horror tropes. And you're going to try and subvert them, or you're going to do something that's going to make him have to face up to the horrors of this thing. It doesn't. It never leans into true horror. It never decides what kind of horror it wants to be. big spider. I hate stuff like, oh, it's just a big monster. Oh, okay. Like it never fit. Like, it's meant to be a horror game, but it never sort of goes into this idea of horror. And then when it gets to the end, do you know what I thought about when I was watching this? Actually, because I've been recently reading Hellblazer, so I've been reading the first sort of, I'm up to the mid hundreds. I'm sorry, I can't remember the flaming writers, but there's a period where John is obviously going up against the first of the Fallen.
With Garth Ennis.
But it extends beyond that, I think.
But then later with Jenkins.
Thank you. It's Jenkins that does it. Jenkins brings it back because he then has to go to hell and he sees what's happening to his father because his dad was killed by the family man way back when. And the first of the Fallen is like, I'm going to make you confront all the stuff you've had to face before. And here's your father being hung by basically like coat hangers and tortured and stuff. And Constantine has to deal with it, but he's a bit like, yeah, he kind of deserves this. Like, he wasn't a good person, and he has to reconcile with that to get himself out of the situation. And so I'm thinking, like, the end of this is him going to be confronted by, like, his father with Alzheimer's or his mom, or so. Like, there's going to be something where it's going to be the true horror is himself. He's going to see himself, like his father's going to turn into him with Alzheimer's, or there's going to be like true fear of what he is terrified of in the future. And it's not. It's just like. It comes in down to his mum saying she's got to call him because he feels like he's abandoned her, he's left her at home. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a bit, like you're not going for anything like that. That's so easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, so the thing with Alzheimer's, there is a good moment where he's like, it really needs to stop without that final reveal and explore this crazy gaming place. And, when he's on the floor going, I don't know who I am. Okay, well, there's the reference to Alzheimer's. Yeah. But it doesn't really make that connection. Well,
I don't think, no, I thought the same. I don't think they realized that when they were writing or filming this.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, it definitely doesn't underline it enough that you get that connection and it's resonant, right? But that's the level it needs to stop on. This thing of the call mom. Okay, so we were left to think that from the beginning, it's clear that he has an estranged relationship with his mother. We briefly see her in his fantasy before he's pulled back into level 2, as you put it, where, the mom, is out of it and, doesn't know who he is. But that's as much horror as we get there. And then, as you say, we never see the father. Okay, for me, that final ending that we've both admitted like makes no sense whatsoever and kind of invalidates the entire episode. Then he's saying mom, 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 and we see the notes of the woman assistant who's typing this up, and it says called mom. Now, first of all, in your notes, he called out mother. He called out mom. You don't just say called mom, but it's written. I mean, nobody does that. I've read a million police reports. I've read a million notes on shit. Nobody's going to type 2 words into that field. Okay, that annoys me. But it's there so that you can say, oh, he finally called mom. Like, that is so stupid, beyond imagination. Like, he finally called his mother back. But he didn't. He called out mom as he was dying. Aren't we smart? Like, that's really, really, really bad.
Oh, no, it is. It really is. It's, again, this is that idea of, it's lazy. But the other thing is the reason. The other thing so that I agree. That bothered me when I was like, oh, called mom. Like, I'm surprised the episode is not called call your mom or something like that. Like, if you really want to fucking hammer that home. But the problem I have with this, again, I call out logistics. That sort of this. It seems to irk me for some reason. Maybe it's just the way I am. And there's little things like, well, if you're going to do this kind of testing on someone that's based around their psychology and their fear, like, you're not just grabbing random people off the thing, because if you're doing human testing to go to market, like, you've got to show that this is successful. You would need all kinds of psychological testing. You would need them to have gone through, been tested by a psychologist and all sort of stuff for them to go, this is safe for them to do. They're stable. They can face up to this thing, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is the whole thing with the telephone. Like he takes a photo of this headset, and then leaves his phone on. And we find out at the very end that the thing that's basically caused this whole thing was the phone wasn't on airplane mode or wasn't turned off. So I'm like, so why was his phone only taken off him as he was about to go in the room? Literally, as he walked into this place, they should be like, right, your phone goes in this insulated baggie and goes in this locker. You will get it back at the end.
Well, and
Problem
we're going to pat you
solved.
down
Yeah,
because we have our liability is like we made somebody brain dead and killed them. You know.
Yeah. Well, more than that,
I mean,
but more than that, he walks through a room of all these people designing and creating stuff, and like, no, that's NDA level kind of stuff.
Oh, I know.
Like, and I'm like, and then they're like, oh, can we have your phone? I'm like, sorry, I've worked in offices for less where they will take my phone at reception and I get it back at the end of the day.
Yes. No, that's right. Absolutely. Well, okay, here's another little quibble. Well, we're going to talk about the phone. I don't know how things are over there in Britain, but I can assure you there are no American phones that have a what's it called? The screen when it's not unlocked yet, the lock screen, where you can just swipe right to turn the phone off. Okay. That is not a thing. That's not how anything works. I mean, there's a power button you can hold,
and then swipe,
right, but she doesn't do that. I mean, it's just this swipe that he easily swipes back for. And then when she comes in, there's this odd cut that like is going to come back and be like a juncture point where you hear the door opening and it's like, oh no, I'm caught with the phone taking a photo of this device for money. You sell it to the press, is the idea. And then suddenly she comes in incongruous with the last cut and he's already sitting down. And you're like, oh, that's a kind of like either really horrible editing or a clear skip moment where, given that this, this is going to be a sort of VR thing, is going to be important, and that's the cut. Okay, I guess it ends up being the cut, but it's not, because it's a minute later that the phone rings as he's being uploaded. But again, like, that doesn't wind up being important. Like, that's such a, like, we're clever, we're setting that thing up. But then it's like a minute too early. It doesn't seem to know what it's doing there.
No, it doesn't.
I'm just,
No, I agree. Well, the other thing as well is these little things that bother me about the ending. The CEO that you find out is real because you've been seeing him on the magazine and so far. He is real. When he comes in and he's played off as callous and just walks out and says, "I'll make a note of it." No, you've just found out that a woman thought the phone was turned off whilst this guy was on his own with secret technology and is now on. And he's not going, check the phone. What was it on doing on? Was there any phone calls made? Were any images, photos taken? Check it. Like, no, it's such the casual response at the end is so irritating because I'm like, and she's like, oh, it won't happen again. And I'm like, sure, you're not going to check the phone? Like, you are just going to trust that this guy sat there. Like, it just laziness again, where I'm just like,
let me get back to this in-world kind of like test subjects, these problems that you're pointing out in a second. Before that, how does he know it's a VR device? And how does he know what the CEO looks like? Because everything, from he has the phone ringing to the end.
The only thing is, the magazine, he's seen a full face of him, right? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, but he doesn't know that it's a VR thing. Like, his fantasy is totally in continuity with what
design
actually is the thing. Like, I mean, that's so stupid to me. This is why that final reveal was not planned, right? Like, that's not integrated into the thing. That's like, well, what if there was another twist? Yeah, you did not integrate that into the whole script.
No, that's what I'm saying again. Like this, This is one of those episodes where I think, write the script out linear, how you want it, and then I'd look at it and go, right, how can I tell this is about VR and gaming? I want you to have, an untrustworthy narrator and I want you to question reality. I want you to come out at the end of this not being in not like Inception level stuff, not entirely sure that you've actually left the game.
Mhm.
Right? Don't give me that final, not the final mum crap. Give me the one before that where he goes home and there's something off that doesn't feel right. Like he may not have left the game. But then tell the story in a different way. Like as he is going through the house, like he's talking to that woman, the woman who's introduced to him at the it takes him through the Katie, the woman that works at the gaming company.
Sonia.
Sonia's the woman outside.
Oh, the assistant.
Yeah, like the assistant, like
Katie.
Yeah. So when he's in the house, like he's talking to her through a headpiece, through an earpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what then? And she actually says to him, she says, "Well, you've been very chatty. This is a thing that people do when they're scared.
They're scared
because they like to hear a voice. They like to hear it makes them feel more comfortable." Do you know what then? Forget the whole. No, don't forget the Sonya stuff. Do you know what then? Have him tell Katie the story. As stuff gets creepier in the house, like really lean into like old-fashioned gothic horror, like M.R. James, kind of like creepy, like candles and lights going out, rocking chairs going on their own, and all this other stuff, right? Have it like a proper creep. As he gets more scared, he keeps talking to Katie, and he is relaying the story of how he got to this position. And therefore, as he is doing that, it's bringing forth all that is bringing forth, because it's leading up to the point of going like, I have to go home. I'm here to gain money to buy a ticket to go home, and I have to face my problems. And when he reaches that point of telling Katie about that, that's the switching point where it goes to hell, because all of a sudden his brain's gone, I've been able to mask all this up until now, but now I'm facing up to the fact that I've got to go home. I've got to face up to my mother. I've got to face up to the death of my father. And that bullying character, I walked out on a job and he was my boss. Like, have that all be like, and that's to me is like, you're building up this narrative, this character, whilst you're having doing a horror film. You can not just tell it, not just have flashbacks, use the footage you've filmed for the first half. You can have it interspersed and then have him cut back and Katie going like, well, Sonia sounds like a lovely woman. Who did you say she worked for again? And then have it where he has the mental breakdown and then they pull him out. And he goes, oh my God, like, then have him, like say, really hammer that home, that fear of Alzheimer's, that fear of losing control.
Right.
And then
have him connections.
Yeah. And then have him going home and then have something as he gets home, like that his father's there, or there's something that's not right about this reality. Or the boss that was a bully to him is dressed the same as he was in the haunted house. And you're like, he never left the game. Like that's the ending. That's the episode. Sorry, I know I do this a lot, but
no, I mean I do think that would be an improvement. I'm bothered by a lot of these. To me, it's not as much a linear versus flashback problem. I do agree that that's a better ending, and like Chris Nolan is the one to look to here. But I'm really bothered by the Katie showing up. Not Katie. What's the? I just had
Sonia.
Sonia showing up, and she's got this explanation, and she's like, "Oh, I tracked your cell phone." He's like, "But we're in a different location." I mean, how has he come up with this explanation if this is all in his head? I mean, but that whole Sonia explanation. It gets into this like human test subjects idea, right? So she says that they have basically killed a bunch of people as guinea pigs, and the reason that they've chosen him is because he's a foreigner, right?
Yeah,
and somehow easier
yeah.
to, right? And okay, so that at least like there's a plausible explanation for like what's going on at that level, right? But then we throw that plausible explanation out to go for this totally implausible one at the end.
Well,
Um,
no, you're wrong. Because the ending at the end hit the boss being, because he says put him with, there's this thing of put him with the others. But then when the boss
right.
walks out in the very end, when he is coma, completely catatonic on that sofa, and you got the called mom thing, and the boss just walks out, that sort of suggests that she's right, and they have done this to other people, because he's a bit like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, make a note of that one, with the others, and you're like, oh, so
Right.
this has happened before. So how did he know?
Yes. Yeah. Right. Exactly. No, you're that's exactly correct, and I accept the correction there.
Mm.
Um, you know, but I think that like that's a plausible explanation. But again, right, as you say, how does he come up with this? How does he,
Mm.
I mean, none of this makes sense unless that's really has some component, in which case I guess the helmet made him psychic as well
Yeah.
as frying his brain. I mean, that's the only explanation for some of this. But to get to this sort of like human test subjects, you were talking about needing permission and all of this, and we're supposed to presume that like this guy has a mansion where they're basically killing people.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, like that probably should be part of the story, right? Like if the story only makes sense if there's a renegade VR company that is so committed to making horror video games that it is killing, at least a handful of people and burying the bodies somewhere. I mean, surely we ought to know something about that operation, or that ought to be important to the plot, and it's not really. And I don't know. It feels incomplete in that way.
No, I agree. I absolutely like that suspicion. They try to throw suspicion at the thing, like, oh, he's really elusive, this CEO, and no one knows where he is. If you get a photo of him, then my God, like
Hmm.
you'd be the first in however long. And then he says like, oh, they're based in this, outside of town, in this thing. You go, cool, but you still found this job on an app. There'll still be a
Yeah.
record of you. There's still a record of your account.
Yes.
There's still a record of you saying, I will do this job on this day. And then you disappeared. If you were reported missing, Sonia knows that you've gone there.
Hmm.
So,
Plus, you've already established, like in your fantasy, your cell phone still GPS is functioning, right?
yeah.
Like your fantasy actually establishes one of the ways that this whole thing is going to unravel.
Mm, yeah. This whole sort of deep reality section with the horror and stuff, like it
Mhm.
feels, again, like not wholly thought out. And this is where, like, when you and I have talked about some of these things in the past, like, a bit like Primer is probably one of the best examples where, like you say, you've got like a serial killer board with the red string on, and you're making all the connections, and you can do it, and you can go,
Mhm.
oh, this all works. And time travel films are usually, the ones you've really got to do this like that. And the one we did most recently, which I can't see because I got it covered up, but you know what I
Oh,
mean, like
time crimes.
Time Crimes. Thank you.
Time crimes. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is a similar thing. Like, okay, if you're going to deal with levels of reality and information, like you need to you need to be
Mm.
really tight on the source of that information. Was it discussed? Does the viewer know it? If not, then it's irrelevant, so on and so forth. And again, they don't seem to have done that. Like this feels like this is a polished-ish script, but it could definitely do with another run through with somebody else going like, well, what about this? This doesn't seem to make any sense, or.
Okay. Now, in fairness, we're both Twilight Zone fans. Okay. We've
Mm-hmm,
discussed the
mm-hmm.
Twilight Zone. The very first episode of the Twilight Zone is this story, right? In the sense that what it
Yes.
really is, you know, right. In that case, it's an astronaut who goes crazy preparing for space travel, right? And so that lets Serling go, well, I really like abandoned cities, like
Yeah.
I'm just going to do that. And he
What else?
tries to kind of
How many
create,
other stories can we do that in? Yeah.
yeah, and he tries to create a little bit of correlation
Mm.
from the outside world to the fantasy, but very minimally, and we were
Yes.
dissatisfied with how he does that. So I think this is basically on that same level, right? It's really an excuse for the creators to do a little horror video game and kind of do some jump scares and some terrible monsters and kind of creep you out a little, and I think all that stuff, you're right, it doesn't feel fully thought out, but it still is entertaining. And I think it sort of works at that same level of that Twilight Zone episode, where it's like, yes, I accept all of these problems, but I'm still along for the ride, and it's not as smart as it wants to be or it should be. But, I mean, I guess if I wanted to criticize Black Mirror, I'd say it's a lot of years later, and you've got a lot more money and a lot more time to do it in, and you probably should have done better than this.
Yeah.
But you're right, there needs to be those correspondences. You got to work out that plan if you're doing something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this should be held up as one of those episodes where you're like, oh my god, like if you go back, this links back to this. You can see this here and that sort of thing. Like that'd be really cool. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't. I agree though that it's entertaining. I find, I think Wyatt Russell, as that sort of like awkward American, traveling abroad, and he's mostly charming, and I think he does all right.
Well, let's talk about that. And that's kind of the final thing I'd like to address, which is Cooper. I think he plays a kind of Owen Wilson kind of character.
Yes,
and I love Owen Wilson.
That's a good shout. Yeah,
but thank you. And I think that he sort of starts much more charming to me than the end. And he is, once he's actually in the house, he starts to become really annoying really fast, because it's just like, golly gee, like you got a thing here, and he's like playing up the surfer dude thing because supposedly as a reaction to being scared, but he just kind of like ratchets up the annoying to me. And then I find myself sitting back and saying like, this is all a fantasy. Like I'd be like, okay, I know I might jump at something, but nothing in here can hurt me. I've been assured that I have a safe word. Like there's not a lot of reason to be on pins and needles and ranting about stuff. So I don't totally buy his reaction sometimes. But then I also find myself going like, is this what the Brits think of Americans?
Yes, 100%. Especially
kind of charming but stupid.
Yeah. Another, weird. It's more than what most people think of us when we travel abroad. We go a place and start stealing like historical relics, so it's better. But like the bit where he's on the tour bus and he just keeps asking how tall things are, like.
That's the dumbest question you could ask.
Yeah, like
like not what happened there. How tall is Big Ben?
Yeah, they're the sort of things. But I think the thing with Cooper is, like I say, he starts. Yeah, I know what you're saying about him becoming slightly annoying, but I think there's a reason for that. Like that chattiness and that fear comes through. I agree, it's not scary enough, but I still think you'd have a physical reaction. But again, one of these things is like, that whole bit where he's on traveling, like you say, he's on the tour bus, but we see him go through India, you see him in front of the Taj Mahal, you see him in front of like the Eiffel Tower, you see him in all these different locations. So he's done a lot of traveling. He's this is a well-traveled guy. He's gone on his own, right? Which I'll be, and that's no mean feat to travel that far on your own, right? He's done odd jobs, so he's picked up work as he's gone. He's had to look after himself. So they play him up as a bit stupid and a bit, sort of like daft. But like, look, he's traveled, he's circumnavigated the earth, right? That's actually pretty impressive. Like, I'm not going to lie, that's actually really impressive. Like, he started in Australia and worked his way across. Like, they should be playing up like, all right, if he's going to be scared, either have something where he's like, I've traveled the entire world, I've done all these places, yet this still scares me. All right, have him jump at a spider or something, and have it that Sonia actually calls out. She's like, "Oh my god, you're world travel, yet you're still jumping at a spider," like Or have it that he's a lot more brave, and actually that's why he's so comfortable doing this. Where he's like, "Yeah, no, I've experienced all kinds of stuff. Like I've sat with the Reiki monks of Tibet. I've done this, I've done that. I'm pretty comfortable that your game can't really scare me. Like but he almost forgets that he's traveled the world. It's sort of like he gets to London and then it's just like, wow, he's now gone back to being that uncultured sort of silly American. And you're like, no, this dude should be changed because of his experiences.
No, you're right. That's a very good point. And I sort of found his sort of how tall is that? I was like, yeah, I mean, that's very stupid. Is this the guy? It's hard for me to imagine that a guy who's traveled the world like that would be that he's. And
Have it
then
as a
I
running
sort of
joke.
feel like,
Have it as a running joke. I mean, literally have it like everywhere he
oh,
goes. Like he says the Taj Mahal. How tall is the how high is the Taj Mahal? Like have it as a that would be funny. Like I'd accept that.
yeah.
But yeah, that kind of bothers me. The more I think about it, the more it sort of feels like it's at step with what they're trying to
Yeah, and
do.
he doesn't need to be a world traveler, right? I mean,
Mm,
that's not really important in any way. That's a key point you're making, right? I mean, that whole business of traveling the world is not important at all. It's just there to get him to Britain as the last stop on the way home. That's not well done.
mm. It should be
It's not well
important,
integrated.
especially because the
Yeah.
montage of him traveling takes almost 8 minutes of like it's a long part, and I'm going like, okay, yeah, cool. It's still going. So even the bit with him on the plane with like the little girl, where he's like, there's the turbulence, and
Mm.
he's like, oh yeah, I'm well, I'm well traveled and I'm not scared. It's a roller coaster, and he puts his arms up and stuff, and like I'm like, oh, that's a genuinely nice moment. Like this should play into this thing of his, he's become more compassionate, or he's learned more about himself or something. Yet there's still this fear, this thing lurking in the background that's out to get him. This manifestation of his worry or his fear of going home.
Where did this game company executive come from, and why is he operating in London?
Or outside of Lickham. I think it's what they say.
Yeah,
No, I don't know. I
I
don't know.
mean, okay, maybe he has British citizenship. That's fine. But I don't know. There's so little that we know about that game company and what's being established. One final thing that irritates me, and
Mm,
this is a constant thing, is I'm so irritated every time this happens, is the compression of time in the fantasies. Like,
mm.
it doesn't make sense in Inception, but it's so much more egregious here. A video game headset cannot make you experience hours of time in 1 second. So within level 3, as you put it, when he's pulled back to level 2, they say 1 second has passed. And it's like, oh, that whole thing took 1 second in real time, right? That's not the way the brain works. I mean, the brain can't. I mean, and also that means that this algorithm running this, this program that's running the helmet was probing his fears and figuring things out
So
in one
fast.
second. like
Yeah.
this is so stupid.
Well,
So
this
stupid.
goes back to this is a similar thing to that the Christmas special of
Mm-hmm.
moving you forward three
Mm-hmm.
weeks, 6 months, 1,000 years a minute is going to be experienced in that
Yes.
thing, and you're just like, that's not how computers work. Like,
Right. And then why compound it when you at the very end to see it's like 0.04 of a second or something?
mm,
Like the whole, I mean, that's some really brain dead fucking like I'm clever stuff. And
yeah,
it's beneath. I mean, look, Brooker's smart. I mean, Black Mirror's smart, but that is just you combine that with the gotcha, like he called mom,
yeah.
as he died. Aren't I cynical and dark while also being clever? Like, yeah, the time compression thing really bugs me.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I'd agree on that one. I think it's less so here than on the thing. But then the more you talk about it, the more you start to think about this, that you're like, he's had all these conversations, he's processed all this information. Like even the human brain, which is massively sort of thing, isn't that, it's generating new ideas, going through things. It's got to be like, it's
Mm.
going through, it's a bit much. So yeah, it's more entertaining than Nosedive, but
Mm.
it still has massive problems. This, I will say though, I'm my concern that first episode of we've moved into something, and Flash is going to be overtaken by he's overtaking storytelling and stuff, or ideas are just not as good or whatever. is still there. Like Playtest is a better episode. I legitimately think so. But if they all start to feel a bit rushed, where I'm like, oh, this needs another draft. Like Nosedive needed another draft. Like this doesn't feel like it's the final version of this story. It's sort of like this will do. It tells the story we want, or I want it. It gives me the shock or the ending I want, or I can plug away at like virtual reality or something. Does what I want it to do. Move on. Like it feels a little bit like perfunctory, but
that is fair. But keep in mind, he's got to fill 6 episodes instead of 3. You know,
That's
over
true.
here in America, we're not as lazy, and we like to crank out 6 episodes.
Let me say that. Yeah, but let me say this though.
I mean, even 6. I'm joking.
He
But
had 3 years.
6
But
episodes.
he had 3 years between this and the previous season, and I can't believe he was just like, "Oh my god, I've got 2 weeks to write 6 episodes." Like these ideas must have been stewing in his head. Like even with Channel 4 cancelling this, I'm pretty sure like if they'd have gone ahead with another series, they must have had ideas that they were going to put forward.
No,
we shall see. But anyway, any final thoughts? Or are we
No,
good?
I'm good. I mean, I think we concur, except I am offended as an American by the depiction of Americans here. We're not all super dudes, man.
You live in Hawaii.
That is true. I am a surfer dude.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, there we are. That's our sort of discussion of Playtest. Let us know what you think. We're getting into this now. The last episode, I've been a little more cold on this series of Black Mirror. Am I right? Am I wrong? Challenge me. I'm sort of, we're happy to be challenged. Come see what we've got to say at Pod Time Space. And also leave us a review on any of your podcast catchers, 5 stars preferably. And if you really like what you do, come and check us out on Patreon. We do all kinds of bits. We are doing the trekking through the Twilight Zone, the full trek through all the seasons. We're also doing additional supplementary material to the main feed for the films we're covering. And I do things like 30-minute thoughts, and there are other interactions with fans. And it helps keep the lights on at sort of, for stories at Time of Space. Helps us keep going. So we really appreciate it. Anyway.
How else can we keep making these helmets that kill people unless you give us money?
That's right. How can we go through this Black Mirror experience of talking through the computer at you if you're not going to give us money? Maybe I'm going to cover that in some episode. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we shall see you again soon.